Chosen one, God did not randomly scatter suffering into your life. He placed a specific test in front of you, the same test he has placed in front of thousands of chosen ones throughout history. He takes the thing you rely on most, removes it without warning, and then goes silent. No explanation, no timeline, no sign that he is still there. He watches to see if you will hold your ground when there is nothing beneath your feet. Abraham faced this test on a mountain. David faced it hiding in a cave. Joseph faced it rotting in a prison cell. And when God placed it in front of you, he was not experimenting. He already knew your answer. But you had to know it too. That is why the fire had to burn the way it did. That is why the silence had to stretch as long as it did. That is why the betrayal had to cut as deep as it did. Most people who enter this fire pull themselves out before the refining is complete. They survive, but they never become what they were meant to become. You did not pull out. And that decision, the one nobody applauded, the one nobody even noticed, has registered in a place where it matters more than every failure the world has recorded against you. Stay with me through this entire message. I am going to show you exactly what test you passed, why most people fail it, and what God has quietly set in motion for those who remain standing after the fire. And I need you to understand something before we go any further. This message is not short. It is not surface level. It is not the kind of thing you half listen to while doing something else. By the time we reach the end, you will know the exact nature of the test God placed in your path, the reason thousands before you could not pass it, a specific tool to navigate the season that comes after the fire, and an activation that I believe will seal something permanent in your spirit. If you leave early, you will miss the part that was designed specifically for you. So stay, not because I am asking, but because something in you already knows this message carries weight. Now, let me show you the test, not the version most people talk about, not the generic idea that life is hard and God is building character. I am talking about a specific, repeatable, documented pattern that God has used on every single person he has ever elevated to a position of real authority. And once you see this pattern, you will never look at your pain the same way again. Here is what God does. He identifies the one thing in your life that you depend on the most, the thing that makes you feel safe, the thing that gives you identity, the thing that you would fight to protect above everything else. And then he removes it. Not gradually, not gently, he strips it. For some of you, it was a relationship. The person you thought would be there forever walked out of your life so suddenly that you are still replaying the last conversation, wondering what you missed. For some of you, it was financial. The income that held your world together disappeared, and overnight you went from stable to barely surviving, counting every dollar, lying awake calculating numbers that never added up. For some of you, it was your health. Your body turned on you at the worst possible moment, and the thing you always took for granted, the simple ability to function, became something you had to fight for every single day. For some of you, it was your reputation. People you trusted told stories about you that were not true, and you stood there watching your name be dragged through dirt while God said nothing, absolutely nothing. And for some of you, it was all of these at once. The relationship, the money, the health, the reputation, the silence from heaven, everything collapsed in the same season, like dominoes falling in slow motion, and you could not stop a single one. That was not chaos, chosen one. That was not bad luck. That was not karma, and it was not punishment. That was the test. And here is what most people never understand about it. The test was never about whether you could survive the loss. It was about what you would do in the silence that came after. Because after God strips the thing away, he does something that feels almost cruel. He goes quiet, no confirmation, no reassurance, no sign, no dream, no whisper, nothing. Just you, standing in an empty room with nothing but your faith and your fear, and the only question that matters echoing off every wall. Will you still trust me when you cannot see me? That question is the test. Everything else, the loss, the betrayal, the collapse, that was just the setup. The actual examination happens in the silence. And it is in that silence where most people break. But you did not break. I want you to sit with that for a moment. You did not break. You bent. God knows you bent. There were nights where you bent so far you thought you would snap, but you held. Something inside you, something deeper than logic, deeper than willpower, deeper than anything you can explain, grabbed hold of a promise you could not see and refused to let go. That is not normal human behavior, chosen one. That is not just resilience. That is the fingerprint of someone who was built for what comes next. If you are still listening right now, it is not because you have nothing else to do. It is because your spirit recognized what I just said. That recognition is not random. It is confirmation. Now let me reframe something that has been sitting in your chest for months, maybe years. You have been calling this season your worst chapter. You have been describing it to the few people who would listen as the hardest time of your life. And you were right. It was hard. I will never minimize that. But what you called your worst year was actually your examination room, and the silence you interpreted as God abandoning you was never absence. It was observation. He was not gone. He was watching. He was measuring. He was recording every single moment. You chose faith over bitterness. Every single morning you got up when staying in bed would have been easier. Every single prayer you whispered into a ceiling that gave you nothing back. And here is what I need you to understand before we go deeper. What I have just shown you, this pattern, this test, this is only the first layer. Knowing that the test exists changes how you see your past. But what I am about to show you next, why most people fail this test, that will change how you see yourself. Because the reason you passed is not what you think. And it has to do with something that was placed inside you long before you were born. If something just shifted in your spirit, type the words, "I see it," in the comments to anchor that recognition. Now you know the test. You know the pattern. God strips, God silences, God watches. But knowing the test existed is only half the truth. The other half is harder. And it starts with a question that most people are afraid to ask. If God used the same test on thousands of people, why did most of them fail? This is not a comfortable question, because when you look at the people who failed this test, they were not weak. They were not faithless. Many of them loved God. Many of them prayed daily. Many of them had been walking a spiritual path for years. And yet, when the fire came, they could not hold. There are 3 reasons, and understanding them will show you something about yourself that you have never seen clearly. The first reason most people fail is this: they trusted their eyes more than their faith. When God removed the thing they depended on, they looked at the visible evidence and made a logical decision. The money is gone, so God must have left. The relationship ended, so the blessing must have been revoked. The silence is too long, so the promise must have expired. Their reasoning was sound, their logic was airtight. And it was completely wrong. Because the test is specifically designed to make the visible evidence lie. That is the entire point. God removes every external confirmation, so the only thing left standing is internal trust. And when they saw the empty bank account, the empty bed, the empty inbox, the empty prayer journal, they believed what they saw instead of what they were told. and they walked away. Not because they were bad people, but because they let their eyes overrule their spirit. The second reason is even more subtle. They confused the test for the destination. They thought the fire was their life. They looked at the suffering and concluded that this was how things would be from now on. They stopped expecting change. They stopped believing that the pain had an endpoint. And when you stop believing the fire has an exit, you stop walking toward it. You sit down in the middle of the flames. You build a home in the furnace. And you spend the rest of your life managing heat instead of walking through it. The fire was never meant to be permanent, chosen one. It was a passage, a corridor, a hallway between who you were and who you are becoming. But if you mistake the hallway for the house, you will never reach the room that was prepared for you on the other side. The third reason is the one that matters most for you. They pulled out of the fire too early. They survived. They made it far enough to tell the story. But they removed themselves from the refining process before it was complete. Think about what happens when a goldsmith pulls gold from the furnace before the impurities have separated. The metal looks solid, it looks finished. But mixed inside the gold is still lead, still iron, still fragments of what does not belong. It will hold together for a while. But when pressure comes, when weight is placed upon it, when it is tested again, it cracks, because it was never fully refined. And that is exactly what happened to thousands of chosen ones who faced this same test before you. They got close. They endured most of the fire. But at the last moment, in the final stretch, when the heat was at its highest and the purification was almost complete, they pulled out. They chose relief over completion. You did not pull out. And this is where I want to slow down, because what I am about to show you is not theory. It is a pattern recorded across thousands of years of sacred history. And when you see it, you will realize you are standing in a very specific lineage. Look at Joseph, a young man anointed with dreams, favored by his father, destined for greatness. And God's test came for him not once but across 13 years. His brothers threw him into a pit. He was sold as a slave. He was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. He was thrown into a prison cell where he rotted for years while the people he helped forgot about him completely. 13 years of silence. 13 years of no explanation. 13 years of watching everyone around him live their life while his stood perfectly still. And do you know what Joseph did in that prison? He served. He did not complain. He did not curse God. He did not demand answers. He served the other prisoners faithfully, as though the prison were the palace he had been promised. That is how he passed. Look at David, anointed king at 15 years old. The prophet Samuel poured oil over his head in front of his entire family and declared that this boy would sit on the throne. And then God sent him back to the sheep. For 15 years, David was hunted like an animal by King Saul. He lived in caves. He ate scraps. He led a group of broken, rejected men through wilderness after wilderness, while the throne he was promised sat occupied by someone else. And there was a night in a cave when David stood over the sleeping body of Saul with a sword in his hand. He could have ended it. He could have taken what was promised. Every man around him whispered, "God has delivered your enemy into your hand." And David put the sword down. He refused to force what God had promised to give. That is how he passed. And then there is Job, the man who lost everything in a single day: his livestock, his servants, his children, his health. His wife turned to him in his agony and said, "Curse God and die." His closest friends sat around him for 7 days in silence, and when they finally opened their mouths, it was to accuse him of deserving every bit of it. And Job, sitting in ash, scraping his wounds with broken pottery, said words that have echoed through eternity. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Do you see it, chosen one? Do you see the pattern? The same fire, the same silence, the same stripping of everything external. The same impossible choice between surrendering to the evidence and holding on to a promise you cannot see. Before I continue, gently press the like button, not for me, so that this message can reach someone who is still standing in the fire right now, someone who needs to know that the furnace has a door on the other side. Now, there is a word in the original Hebrew that most translations get wrong, and when you hear the real meaning, it will change everything. The word that English Bibles translate as tested is the Hebrew word bachan. But bachan does not mean a quiz. It does not mean a pass or fail exam, the way you might picture one. Bachan is a goldsmith's word. It means to assay, to examine by fire, to place raw metal into the furnace and burn it at the exact temperature required to separate what is pure from what is not. When Scripture says that God tested Abraham, or that God tested David, or that God tested Job, the original language is saying that God placed them into a refiner's fire, not to see if they would survive, but to see what would remain after everything that was not gold had been burned away. When God Bachan tested you, he was not grading you, he was refining you. He was not looking for perfection. He was looking for what would not melt, and what did not melt. Your trust, that is what remained, under every layer of fear, under every night of doubt, under every morning where you had to drag yourself out of bed with nothing to look forward to. There was a layer of trust that the fire could not touch. And that layer, chosen one, is pure gold. You have been listening carefully for a while now. That is not casual. Something in you recognizes this pattern because you lived it. You are not listening out of curiosity. You are listening because every word is landing on a wound you have been carrying, and for the first time, the wound is starting to make sense. Let me put it plainly. The ones who failed this test were not weaker than you. They were not less faithful. They were not less loved by God. They were simply not ready. Readiness is not about strength, chosen one. It is about willingness. The willingness to stay when staying makes absolutely no sense to the human mind. And you, for reasons you may never fully understand, had that willingness. You did not pass because you are stronger than everyone else. You passed because you refused to let go of something you could not see, could not prove, and could not explain to anyone around you. And that refusal is the rarest quality God has ever witnessed in the human heart. They were given the fire and they ran. You were given the fire and you remained. They were given the silence and they filled it with noise, with complaints, with ultimatums, with demands for answers. You were given the silence and you learned to listen inside it. They were given the loss and they mourned what was taken. You were given the loss and you discovered what could not be taken. They abandoned the path. When the path went dark, you walked the path blind. If you recognize yourself in what I just described, type the words, "I stayed," in the comments right now, not as a boast, as a memorial, a marker for the moment you finally understood why the fire was necessary. Now, this alone would change how you see everything you survived, but there is one more layer I have not shown you yet. Because knowing the test and knowing why most people fail still does not answer the deepest question. Why you? Out of everyone who faced this fire, why were you one of the ones who held? The answer is not what you think. And it has to do with something that was planted inside you before you ever took your first breath. Something the fire could not burn because it was never made of anything this world could destroy. I told you there was something specific about you. something that separated your response from every other person who faced the same fire. And here it is. You did not pass because you were stronger. You did not pass because you had more faith than the ones who fell. And you certainly did not pass because your life was easier or your pain was less severe. In many cases, your fire burned hotter than theirs. Your silence lasted longer, your losses cut deeper, and still you held. The reason you passed comes down to one single quality, and it is the rarest quality God has ever encountered in the human spirit. You refused to abandon trust when there was zero evidence to support it. Let me say that again because I need it to land. When every visible sign in your life pointed toward failure, when every logical conclusion said God is not here, when every person around you had already decided that your season of pain was permanent, something inside you whispered, no. Not loudly, not dramatically, not with fireworks or goosebumps or some supernatural vision in the middle of the night. Just a quiet, stubborn, almost irrational refusal to accept that the story was over. That refusal is not something you manufactured, chosen one. You could not have produced it through willpower alone. It was planted in you before you were formed. It is the reason God selected you for the test in the first place. He did not test you to see if you would pass. He tested you so that you would see what he already knew was inside you. And now I need to address something that I sense happening right now as you listen. Part of you is resisting what I am saying. Part of you is uncomfortable with the idea that you passed. There is a voice inside you, and it is speaking right now, whispering something like this. What if they are wrong about me? What if I did not really pass? What if I just got lucky and the real test is still coming and I will fail it completely? I need you to hear me. That doubt is not a sign of weakness. That fear of what comes next is not evidence that you are unprepared. It is actually the opposite. It is the very quality that got you through the fire. The people who crashed after their elevation had no fear at all. They walked into their next season with blind confidence, no awareness of the weight they were carrying, no respect for the responsibility that comes with passing, and they collapsed under it. Your fear, the healthy kind, the kind that makes you take every step carefully, the kind that keeps you humble when the world would understand if you boasted, that fear is proof that you are ready. Because readiness was never about the absence of doubt, it is about the presence of trust in spite of doubt. The test is over, but I know doubt is still running in the background. Doubt will whisper that the fire was meaningless, that you are reading too much into your own pain, that nothing is actually coming, and you are just another person who suffered for no reason. Let me put that to rest right now. And I hear the Father saying, I did not test you to break you. I tested you to show you what you are made of. And what you are made of, my child, is the same material I use to build the foundations of eternity. You are not fragile. You are not lucky. You are forged. And what I am about to place into your hands, you will not drop, because the fire already proved that your grip does not loosen when the heat rises. Let me ask you something directly. When was the last time someone told you that what you survived actually mattered? Not in a generic, everything happens for a reason kind of way, but someone looking you in the eyes and saying, what you walked through was a divine examination, and you passed it, and what comes next is going to be worth every second of the fire. If the answer is never, then receive it now. Because this is that moment. Let me tell you about someone who stood exactly where you are standing. A man, 47 years old, had spent 15 years building a business from nothing. 15 years of early mornings and late nights and sacrifices that nobody saw, and in the span of 3 months, it all came apart. A partner betrayed him. Contracts were cancelled. His wife, overwhelmed by the pressure, told him she needed space and moved out. His body, which had been running on adrenaline for years, finally collapsed, and he spent 2 weeks in a hospital room staring at a ceiling, wondering if God had forgotten his address. 8 months in the fire, no income, no partner, no clear direction from heaven, just silence. He told me that the hardest part was not the loss itself. The hardest part was waking up every morning and choosing to believe that the silence meant something other than abandonment. On day 240, his phone rang. A company he had never contacted, in an industry he had never considered, offered him an executive position at 3 times his former income. But here is what struck me about his story. He said the job was not the miracle. The miracle was that he was still standing to receive the call, because he knew at least a dozen people who had faced similar fires and walked away from their faith long before month 8. He did not pass because he was more talented. He passed because he stayed in the fire when every voice, internal and external, told him to leave. He later told me he discovered something called neuroactive along the way, but that is another conversation for another time. What matters is where it all began. And it began with one decision repeated 240 times. The decision to stay. Now, you know the test. You know why most people fail it, and you know why you passed. But let me reframe one more thing that has been weighing on you. The loneliness you experienced during the test, that devastating feeling that you were completely alone and no one understood, and even God had left the room. That was not abandonment. That was God clearing the examination room. When a student takes a final exam, the proctor removes every other voice from the room. No helpers, no textbooks, no whispering from the seat next to you. Just you and the test. God did not leave you alone because he stopped caring. He cleared the room because the test required it. And you passed it alone because you were meant to carry what comes next with your own hands. You are tested. You are refined. You are ready. If your spirit just confirmed what was spoken over you, type "I receive" in the comments to seal that truth. And before this message ends, I am going to speak something over your life that is not information. It is impartation, an activation. Something I believe will stay rooted in you long after you close this message. Stay with me, because what I am about to reveal about what God does with someone who passes the fire, this is the part that changes everything. Now, let me show you what God does with someone who passes the fire. Because what comes next is not what most people expect, and it has already begun in your life, whether you have noticed it or not. When most people imagine what God gives to those who pass his test, they picture a reward, a gift, something nice that arrives in the mail as a thank you for enduring the fire. But that is not what happens. That is not what happened to Joseph after 13 years. That is not what happened to David after 15. And that is not what is happening to you. What God gives to those who pass is not a reward. It is a deployment. There is a massive difference. A reward is something you enjoy. A deployment is something you carry. A reward says thank you for your patience. A deployment says, I trust you with this. And what God is preparing to place into your hands, into your voice, into your influence, into your daily life, is not a pat on the back for surviving. It is a mission that requires everything the fire built into you. Look at what happened to Joseph after the prison. He was not given a vacation. He was given a nation to feed during a famine. The very skills he developed in the darkness, the ability to manage, to interpret, to lead without recognition, those became the tools that saved millions of lives. His fire was not about him. His fire was about what he would carry on the other side of it. Look at what happened to David after the caves. He was not handed a crown and told to relax. He was given a fractured kingdom to unify, enemies on every border, and the weight of an entire people on his shoulders. The patience he learned while being hunted, the mercy he practiced when he could have killed Saul, the faith he exercised in the wilderness, all of it became the foundation of his reign. The fire was never about punishment. The fire was preparation for weight. And the only people God trusts with real weight are the ones who proved they would not collapse under the heat of the furnace. Let me bring this together. In the first revelation, I showed you that your suffering was a specific test, not random chaos. In the second revelation, I showed you why most people fail, because they trusted their eyes, confused the test for the destination, or pulled out before the refining was complete. In the third revelation, I showed you why you passed, because of a quality planted inside you before birth, a refusal to abandon trust that the fire could not burn away. And now, in this final revelation, I am showing you what all of it was leading to. Your patience under fire is why you passed. Your silence when you could have screamed is why you are still here. Your faith, when every visible sign pointed to failure, is why what is coming cannot be stopped. And your refusal to abandon the path when the path itself seemed to abandon you is why God is about to trust you with something that most people will never be asked to carry. You are not just someone who survived a hard season. You are one of the ones who passed, the tested, the refined, the unbreakable. And what God has set in motion for you is not a small adjustment. It is not a minor upgrade to your circumstances. What comes after this test is a complete repositioning of your life, and it has already begun. Now, I want to give you something practical, because revelation without application is just inspiration, and inspiration fades. What I am about to share is a framework I call the post-test protocol. It is built around 3 steps, designed specifically for the season you are entering right now, the season immediately after the fire. The first step is strategic silence. Do not announce what God is building. Joseph did not hold a press conference when Pharaoh promoted him. David did not send word to Saul that the throne was changing hands. The ones who survived the fire and then immediately broadcast their elevation to the world invite interference before the foundation is set. Protect what is emerging by keeping it between you and God until it is strong enough to stand on its own. The second step is frequency realignment. And this is where I need to share something with you that connects everything we have discussed to what is happening inside your body right now. Your brain has been running in survival mode for months, possibly years. Every cell in your nervous system has been operating at a frequency designed for crisis. Pumping cortisol, suppressing creativity, shutting down the parts of your mind that generate clarity and intuition, and those sudden moments of knowing where you feel connected to something larger than yourself. You passed the spiritual test. But your brain has not received the memo yet. Your brain is still running the frequency of someone who is in the fire, even though the fire is behind you. And until that frequency shifts, you will feel a strange gap between what your spirit knows is true and what your mind keeps telling you. There is a specific brainwave connected to this. Scientists at MIT and Princeton have documented it extensively. It is called the gamma wave, and it is the frequency that researchers have linked to genius-level clarity, deep intuition, and what some have called the flow state. That effortless zone where decisions come easily and everything seems to align. Here is what the research shows. Every child is born with high gamma activity. It is the reason children learn so fast, create so freely, and seem to operate with a kind of magical awareness that adults lose over time. But starting around age 7, modern life begins to suppress these waves. Stress, accelerates the suppression, trauma accelerates it further, and a prolonged season of spiritual testing, the kind you just walked through, essentially pushes gamma into dormancy. A neuroscientist named Dr. Robert Lake spent 34 years studying this phenomenon. His research, which built on work from several leading universities, led him to develop something extraordinary. A 7-minute audio track that uses a technology called brain entrainment to reactivate gamma waves directly, not through meditation, not through mantras, not through years of practice. Through a specific auditory frequency that your brain synchronizes with automatically when you listen through headphones. He called it the Genius Song. Now, I already know what some of you are thinking. I have tried things before: meditation apps, healing frequencies, affirmation tracks. None of them worked, and I respect that skepticism. It is the mark of someone who has been disappointed enough times to stop believing in easy answers. But this is not the same category. Meditation asks your brain to change itself from the inside, which is slow and uncertain. Brain entrainment works from the outside in, delivering a frequency that your brain matches involuntarily, measurable on an EEG in real time. And I would never disrespect your financial situation. $39 is a real decision for many people, and I would never pretend otherwise. But consider this. The traditional way to achieve what this audio does in 7 minutes is through biofeedback therapy at $300 per session, or home neurofeedback equipment that costs $7,000. Dr. Lake compressed that entire technology into a single audio file. The standard price is $49, but through the link in the description and the pinned comment, he has made it available for $39 because his mission has always been to get this into the hands of the people who need it most, not the people who can afford the most. That $39 includes the full audio track plus 4 additional bonuses: a children's version called Genius Child, a classic book on prosperity that inspired the film The Secret, a guided visualization covering finances, relationships, health, and happiness, and an infographic of the 5 most important daily habits, all of it backed by a 100% money-back guarantee. If you feel nothing, you pay nothing. The only risk is not trying. Let me tell you about a man, 51 years old, who had been unemployed for nearly 2 years after his company downsized. He was not incompetent. He was one of the best in his field. But something had shifted in his mind. He described it as a fog, like walking into job interviews with a brain that refused to perform. Words would not come. Ideas that used to flow freely were locked behind a wall he could not see. 11 days after he began listening to this audio track, he received his first job offer in 23 months, and the position was better than the one he had lost. He told me the change was not in his resume. The change was in his head. Every day your gamma waves remain suppressed is another day. Your post-test elevation operates at a fraction of its potential. You passed the spiritual fire. Your brain simply needs to catch up. The version of you that walked through the furnace is ready. Your mind just needs permission to operate at the frequency it was designed for. One important thing: there are counterfeit versions of this technology circulating online, websites using the same name, but delivering ordinary audio with no brain entrainment technology behind it. The only way to receive the authentic track with the full technology, all 4 bonuses, and the money-back guarantee is through the link I have placed in the description and the pinned comment below. Do not search for it on Amazon, Spotify, or anywhere else. Those are not the real thing. If your spirit resonates with what I just shared, the link is below, only if you feel led. The third step of the post-test protocol is the readiness posture. Begin preparing as though what was promised is already on its way, not in a desperate, anxious way, in a quiet, confident way. The way Joseph likely organized his prison routine with the discipline of a governor long before the title was given. The way David led his ragged band of men in the wilderness as though he were already commanding an army. Readiness is not about forcing the outcome. It is about aligning your daily behavior with the identity that was revealed in the fire. You are not waiting for permission to become who you are. The fire already gave you permission. If you want to release the survival frequency that no longer serves you, type "I release" in the comments right now. You have been here for a while now. That is not casual, chosen one. Something is being activated inside you as we speak. I can feel the weight of this message shifting from information to experience. And what I am about to do next is the reason this message was placed in front of you today. Do not say Amen yet. What I am about to declare over you is not information. It is impartation. It is not a lesson. It is an activation, and I need you to be fully present for it. Let me gather what was revealed to you today. You learned that your suffering was not random, but a specific, deliberate test that God has administered to chosen ones throughout history. You learned that most people fail this test because they trust what they see instead of what they know, because they mistake the fire for the destination, or because they pull out before the refining is complete. You learned that you passed because of a quality planted inside you before birth, a refusal to let go that the fire could not touch. And you learned that what comes after the test is not a reward, but a deployment, a mission that requires everything the furnace forged into you. You are not alone in this. Right now, as these words move through the air, chosen ones all across the world are hearing this same message. Different cities, different languages, different fires, but the same test. The same refusal to quit, the same gold emerging from the same furnace. You are part of something that stretches far beyond your individual story, and the fact that all of you are going through this exact shift at the same time is not a coincidence. It is a coordinated awakening. Now, before I speak over your life, I want to do something with you, not just for you, with you. In your mind, not out loud, I want you to picture yourself standing at the mouth of a furnace. You can feel the heat still radiating from behind you. The air is thick with everything that was burned away, the doubt, the fear, the old identity, the old limitations. But you are not looking backward. You are facing forward, and in front of you stretches an open field, wide and endless, with no walls, no ceiling, no fence, no boundary of any kind. That field is your next season. The air on your face is cool, the ground beneath your feet is solid, and somewhere in the distance, just beyond what your eyes can see, something is waiting for you, something that was placed there before the fire even began. Feel the weight of the furnace lifting off your shoulders. Feel the coolness replacing the heat, and know, in the deepest part of your spirit, that the fire is behind you. It is finished. What is ahead has no ceiling. And I hear the Father saying, "You passed." And what I have prepared for those who pass is beyond what you have imagined. It is beyond what you have prayed for. It is beyond what your mind, still running in survival frequency, is capable of picturing. But your spirit knows. Your spirit has always known. Step forward. The field is yours, and I am already there. Now, I want to pray over you, and I do not use that word lightly. This is not a routine prayer. This is an activation, a sealing, a commissioning. And I need you to receive it not with your mind, but with the part of you that survived the fire. Father, I come before you now with this chosen one who has walked through a fire that was designed to eliminate everyone who was not ready for what you have prepared. And they are still here. They did not quit. They did not curse your name. They did not abandon the path. When the path went dark, they held, and you saw every moment of it. You saw every night they stayed up praying into a silence that offered nothing back. You saw every morning they dragged themselves out of bed with no guarantee that the day would bring relief. You saw the tears they never showed anyone, the doubts they wrestled in private, the moments where their faith was held together by nothing more than a whisper that said, "I will not let go." And now, I ask you to release over their life what has been held in reserve for this exact moment. Release the fear that they will fail what comes next. Release. Release the doubt that whispers they did not really pass. Release. Release the guilt of surviving when people they loved did not make it through their own fire. Release. Release the old identity that was burned away in the furnace, the version of themselves that no longer fits. Release. Release the need to explain their journey to people who were not in the fire with them. Release. Release the timeline they created for their own life, the schedule they set that God never agreed to. Release. Release every ceiling they accepted because they did not believe they deserved more. Release. Now, activate what was forged. Activate the identity that emerged from the furnace, purified and unshakable. Activate the clarity that comes when gamma waves begin to fire at full capacity. Activate the divine connections that have been held at a distance until the testing was complete. Activate the provision that has been stored and multiplied while they were in the fire, waiting for hands strong enough to carry it. Activate what some call destiny's embrace, that sacred season where everything they were prepared for begins to arrive in ways they could not have orchestrated on their own. Protect this rising. Cover this chosen one from premature exposure, from people who would try to pull them back into the furnace out of jealousy or misunderstanding. Guard what was refined from any force that would attempt to place it back into the fire. What you have purified, let no one contaminate. And now, with everything that was forged in the fire, with every ounce of trust that refused to die, with every tear that became evidence, with every silent prayer that heaven recorded as faithfulness, I speak this declaration: I am the one who passed. I am tested and refined and unbreakable. I am not who I was when I pressed play on this message. I am deployed, commissioned, and sent. I am ready for the weight that comes with this calling, and what God has prepared for me cannot be stopped, cannot be delayed, cannot be redirected, and cannot be taken by anyone or anything that did not walk through the fire with me. Do not say amen yet. I want you to sit in this frequency for just a moment. Do not rush to the next thing. Do not reach for your phone. Let the weight of what was just spoken settle into the deepest part of who you are. Let it root. Let it anchor. Let it become part of the foundation that the next season of your life will be built on. It is done. It is sealed. We receive it. Amen. One more thing before you go. The person who pressed play on this message is not the person sitting here right now. The fire changed you, and now you know it. You are not someone who suffered randomly. You are one of the ones who passed. Type, "I am ready" in the comments, not as an aspiration, as a declaration. Say it with the weight of everything you survived. Say it like someone who walked through a furnace and came out holding gold. If this message brought clarity to what you survived, if it brought meaning to what felt meaningless, if it brought peace to a season that felt like war, let your like be your amen without words. Press it now so this message can continue to reach the ones who are still standing in the fire, wondering if it will ever end. There are more words being prepared for your next season, chosen one. Messages that will meet you exactly where the road turns. Stay connected so they can find you when the time is right. For those who felt called to what I shared about restoring your frequency, the link is in the description and the pinned comment. Only if your spirit confirms. And one last thing. If someone came to mind while you were listening, someone who has been unusually quiet lately, someone who looks fine on the outside but you know something heavier is happening underneath, someone who has been carrying a weight they cannot explain to anyone around them, share this with them. Do not wait. Text it, email it, send it, however you need to. Because this might be the message that helps them understand that the fire they are standing in right now was never meant to destroy them. It was meant to prove what they are made of. And they need to hear that before the enemy convinces them that their suffering is pointless. Walk forward, chosen one. The fire is behind you, the field is ahead, and God is already there. You are not leaving a message, you are leaving a season.